One of our beneficiaries from our gala for the past 10 or 12 years has been Gift of Life. I think it may have started when Jim Hackney was president, and we carried it forward since then. And I'll ask Ken to say a few words after we do the presentation. Just tell us a little bit about where Gift of Life is and where it's heading, because it's kind of keeps changing a little bit of direction. And so with that, I'd like to present this check for $5,000 to Gift of Life.
Thank you. As much as I love this, you guys never let me take the check with me. Well, you do. You give me the real one. So Ron asked me to just a few minutes to give you an update, which is impossible with Gift of Life because there's so much going on. But for those of you who are new, Gift of Life is Gift of Life Northeast Ohio is focused on correcting children heart defects in the developing world. And 1 out of 100 children is born with some kind of heart defect that can be fixed with just one surgery. For many years, you sponsored children in, and we were working at Rainbow Babies and Children's and doing surgeries here, and we served over 60 children that way in a decade. However, we found it much more valuable and much more sustainable by sending out surgical teams, doing teaching, training, and equipment, and equipping developing world hospitals. So we've been working with you over the last couple of years with Akron Children's Hospitals at St. Damian's Children's in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And so far, we have approximately 50 children who have had heart surgeries at St. Damian's in a surgical center that we equipped through the donations that you have made. And we've gotten involved with another Rotary program called Vocational Training Team in which we have exchanged 6 people for the last 2 years between St. Damian's and Akron Children's for training sessions on building up the skill levels in the ICU for St. Damian's Hospital. And right now, we're in the process of working with a hospital consortium that's brought 9 other American hospitals into the group, from Texas to Minnesota to Massachusetts, that are also doing what we are doing in other areas of expertise to help build the only children's hospital in Haiti into something that we can all be very, very proud of. So thank you so much for being over a decade supporter of Gift of Life Northeast Ohio. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome, Ken. And our 2017 gala, which is May 19th, Ron and I would like to share the committee's choice to again feature Gift of Life as one of our beneficiaries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron and Gail. And Ken, thank you so much for being with us this morning and for all of the work you do in Gift of Life.
Makes it all happen. Thank you.
It's our pleasure to support it and be a partner. So, the 3-minute Rotarian for this week was going to be Craig Tallman. Craig couldn't join us this morning, so Craig will tell us a little bit about himself next week. And with that, we will proceed on to this morning's speaker, who is joining us. We're pleased to have Congressman Dave Joyce. Dave is a lifelong resident of Northeast Ohio. He was born in Cleveland and is the proud son of a World War II vet, something we share in common, like many things, I think. He went to West Geauga High School, where he graduated, received a Bachelor of Arts in Accounting and a law degree from the University of Dayton. Upon graduation, he moved back to Cuyahoga County and worked as a public defender. In 1988, Congressman Joyce ran for Congress, in 1988 he ran for prosecutor in Geauga County and was elected that year as the county prosecutor. The evening that he took office in 1988, he told the crowd he would fight crime and work to develop a county the way the people saw fit, not the developers of the courts. In 2005, the Ohio State Women's Bar Association presented the congressman with the Family Friendly Workplace Award for providing his employees family-oriented office environment. And in November 2012, he was elected to represent the 14th Congressional District of Ohio for the 113th Congress and was reelected 2 years later. Presently serves in the 114th Congress, is completing his 2nd term and is seeking a 3rd term, being the representative for the 14th Congressional District of Ohio. Since he joined Congress, he established himself as a leader in a bipartisan effort to preserve and protect the Great Lakes and serves on the important Appropriations Committee, as well as subcommittees on military construction and veterans affairs, interior and environment, and transportation, as well as housing and urban development. Congressman Joyce resides in Geauga County with his wife Kelly and 3 children. Please join me in giving a very warm Rotary welcome to Congressman Dave Joyce of Ohio's 14th Congressional District.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here, even after last night's game. You know, it's funny that out of all 3 kids, my daughter, who just started law school at the University of Cincinnati, seems to be my biggest sports fan, so we're texting back and forth, and she said when they missed that foul ball in the outfield there and things didn't look like they were going our way, you know, the last time there was 2 tied NFL football games in 1997, the Indians lost the World Series. I said, well, you truly are a Cleveland sports fan, honey. But the one thing we can agree on, it's a much needed relief from what else is going on in our country, and that's the election that we have coming up next Tuesday. I hope the Indians win tonight. I hope they have a big parade on Saturday, and then we'll have the election on Tuesday and get back to the business of this country. And I want to just touch on this briefly because obviously it's something that's of great importance in this election. But the fact is, whoever the next president is, he or she will have the ability to appoint on day one 80 federal judges and 1 Supreme Court, maybe 2 to 3 Supreme Court justices. And why is that important, you say? Well, as a lawyer, you realize that, you have the right to vote me in or out every 2 years, or the governor and president every 4 years, or a senator every 6 years. But these are lifetime appointments. And so the changes that have been going up through the court system now, those could be generational before you have another chance to change any of these cases that are sitting before the Supreme Court. And to give you an idea, when I first got to Washington, I didn't vote for it, obviously, in 2013, but we inherited the Affordable Care Act. And I saw the president continue to make waivers in the president as to the implementation that weren't in the law. And I told the speaker at that time, I said, you should sue him. And the speaker gave me that look like, yeah, okay, sit down. And about 9 months later, when it was the speaker's idea, and it was a great idea, we did sue as the House, and you know what? We won. And it's the balance. If the executive and the legislative bodies don't agree, then the judiciary is the only place for recourse. And that's what makes America great, because we do it in a peaceful way. But that kind of stuff is going to, the changes that have been in place by this president will continue on if, in fact, you have a judiciary that's supportive of his many ideas. But enough with that doom and gloom. What we wanted to talk about, or what I want to talk about today, was we felt in the House that no matter who the next president was, we should stop being the opposition party and start being the proposition party. Instead of telling people what we were against, start telling people what we were for. And so I know Nick has passed out some of them, but this is a plan that we got together as the conference after Speaker Boehner left and Speaker Ryan came on, and to be inclusive, decided this is something that we're all going to go back to our effective disciplines and work on how we can make some changes and put out a plan so that whoever the next president is, we can show them this is our plan, these are the things we want to work on going forward. And to give you an idea, the difference is, obviously you heard my background. I was undergrad, I was in accounting and law school. I studied nothing but taxes, and way back when we were young, there used to be 8 big accounting firms, and that's who I was interviewing with. But I had this bug where I wanted to do trial work. And the day I passed the bar, I went down to see the prosecutor, and he said he didn't have any openings. I went down to the public defender's office. They asked me when I wanted to start. And so I started into a field of trying cases and working in the criminal justice sector. But the first guy I met when I got to D.C. happened to be a guy who won a seat in Illinois, and he was a staffer for another member. And then collectively, the next guy we met, the 2 of us, and the 3 of us have become the Wolf Pack. He's a dairy farmer from California. So people come into D.C. from all different walks of life. And so, but they understand what they were doing before they got there, and we should work on those type of things. So we came up with the idea that we wanted to work together and do what the people wanted and talk and work on those type of things. And a few of the things that we wanted to address that were there was, first off, was I've mentioned in the beginning here, was a constitutional authority. We feel that this last president has, our current president, has overstepped his constitutional authority and has done more with executive orders than any other president to date, and that we need to, he's bypassed Congress and done things that Congress should be doing. And so we need to rein in that constitutional authority and start to get back to the ideas that rules and regulations and laws are made by the Congress, the people you elect to represent, and not bureaucrats in D.C. at the different agencies. We want to do the things that help create jobs or provide stability for the jobs that are there and economic growth. I think it's very important that we do those, provide the regulations that have been, as all of you know, affecting businesses, as well as the Affordable Care Act. They need to be either tailored or reined in so that we can continue to provide jobs and provide a climate in which people will think that their future is going to be better than for their children than it was for them. And part of that has to do with, obviously, fixing our tax code. Our tax code is broken, and it needs to be simpler, fair. I think everyone, I know this is blasphemy among those I went to school with, but I think every American on an individual return should be able to fill out a 1-page, 2-sided return and be done with it. And I think corporations, we need to get in line with what it is in the world, and instead of punishing corporations that move their corporate headquarters overseas, we need to start encouraging change our tax code to make sure they come here and encourage other companies to come here and bring the trillions of dollars that's sitting offshore back. Obviously, we want to attack poverty. We think that the things that done so far, we've created we think people can do better for themselves when given the opportunity, put it that way. And we don't believe that people want to be in a lifetime of receiving benefits. We believe that people would like the opportunity to work, and so we should encourage that. And in other words, as goes hand in hand with the tax proposal, the first $50,000 somebody makes, let them keep it. Don't tax it, don't withhold, because they're going to get it back at the end of the year with the exemptions and deductions and credits that they have. So why take it from them and give it back to them next April? Let them keep it and spend it, because that helps energize the economy. But the people who are receiving relief, they should eventually start to be cut, whether it's 90%, then 80%, but force people to get back into work, because work is better for them, it's better for our country, and it would provide for more productivity if everyone was encouraged to work and help train the people for the jobs that exist. And that's an important part of it, too. We have to work with it goes to education, jobs, economy, is the idea that we're training people for the many jobs that exist. When you go to manufacturing companies, you see a lot of the workforce is 50 plus. And I make a point of it whenever I go around in the high schools and kids want to come tag along with me for the day. I bring them along and make sure we have a manufacturing tour. I say, what do you expect to see here? And they expect to see dirt and grime and people angry that they have to be at work. And they get there and they see places that are clean, run by computer, people working as teams, and energized. And so it's unbelievable the difference that in the young person when they come out say, what did you think about that? I said, that was fantastic. And I know manufacturers don't like to hear this, but I tell them all the time that, every now and then, if you could encourage kids to come on a field trip to school and have them parade them through your shop and show them what you do, we may turn one or two, but that's the tide we need to turn to make sure that we encourage kids, the jobs exist. Because not only that, all these manufacturers also tell me the same thing, that we have the money, we're willing to pay, these are good jobs, and we're willing to help educate the kids. So instead of coming out with $100,000 in debt, somebody could come out having made money all while going to school and come out with a degree and come out debt-free. I mean, it's better for everyone if we continue to do that. And lastly, the one thing that I've taken, maybe it's my prosecutorial background, but I've taken a major interest is our national security. Because let's face it, all of our rights don't exist if our nation's not secure here and abroad. And we continue to cut away at the finances of our military and ask them to do more while providing them less. One of the things that I found that's interesting, and I don't know if anybody here has seen the 3D manufacturing, but we've been able to, because our planes are so old, and we can't find parts for them because people don't necessarily manufacture those. They found ways to do that with this 3D printing that's pretty ingenious, and putting instead of having to go rob museums for pieces and parts to make the airplane work, they actually could create some of this. And that's part of the energy that's pretty neat around the country, is watching these type of manufacturing fill in the voids and working with the military to do that. But they deserve better. And the one thing that we find that obviously we have an issue with homegrown terrorists, or HV, homegrown violent extremists. The FBI is in charge of manning those type of situations here in America. And the FBI, no matter what you think about or hear about in the last week, actually does a pretty good job of doing that. But there's only 13,000 members strong. That's the size of Chicago's police department to watch our whole country. And this is going to continue, because what we see as far as national security, the changes are that it's not going to be one uniform marching in line against another uniform. It's going to be what we've unfortunately had seen at Boston and Orlando and San Bernardino, and the attacks that try to disrupt the American way of life. And these people, they want to embed them in communities and create maximum amount of danger. And the only thing that stops those things from a 9/11 incident is the fact that we've provided a good wall of security when it comes to jets. But if they can find more ways to kill more people at one time, that's what they're up to, and that's what they want to do, and that's what the FBI is in charge of. So we have to make sure that our local FBI and in America and our defense people have the wherewithal that they need to properly represent and defend us from these problems here and abroad. Now, feel free to dig into any of those, and also, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to entertain them. But look into, there's also in the program there, it says a better GOP. And you can go online and look through any specifics you want to find out about. I didn't want to go through all of it to bore you this morning because I think it's more important to answer your questions while I'm here than to you listen to me drone on. So with that, I'll be glad to entertain any questions anybody has. Yes?
I forgot all my social studies and histories now. How are the judges appointed and why are they lifetime? I know who appoints them, but why are they lifetime? Why are the judges lifetime?
Why are the judges lifetime? That's the federal process. Once they're approved by the Senate, then it becomes a lifetime appointment. So that's why you have justices on the Supreme Court that are 80 years old and 80 plus, and they'll hold on for the next president to allow the next president to appoint somebody. And you see that's what's happened for some of the furor that they have in the Senate, that they haven't appointed somebody that the president has nominated to fill the Justice Scalia opening.
Okay, so when was it decided just that it had to be lifetime?
It's in the Constitution.
Yeah,
So it's in the Constitution, okay.
Yeah,
It's
it's-
history, but, so for lifetime,
for lifetime.
so there's no way of changing that right now.
Not without a constitutional amendment, but it's, as young lawyers, we used to joke about it was a great gig if you could get it. And I remember one guy, we'd all be talking about what we want to do, and I want to go fight crime, or I want to do this work or that work. And this one gentleman I knew, he said, I want to be a federal appellate judge. And I said, well, why in God's name would you want to do that? It sounds boring. He goes, because you do it for your lifetime. So, okay, I guess you want a lifetime vacation, then that's fine. But I wanted a little more out of the practice of law. Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me. This is a wonderful way of setting it up, too. I enjoyed this experience, so thank you.
You brought up the last week with regard to the email controversy, and I was curious, you being a former prosecutor, and Director Comey of the FBI being a former prosecutor as well, what do you think of the way that he has handled that whole situation?
Well, I'm one of those kind of brass tacks guys, so you get right down to the basis. Mr. Comey is, by all accounts, a stand-up man. I'm in a bipartisan group of former prosecutors, and everybody who's worked in there, who has worked with him, had nothing but before all this, had nothing but the highest regard for him and his ethics and his abilities. But, he did not set up a server off-site, and he did not create an email system outside the governmental system. And he certainly didn't tell anybody else to use their tools and devices off the government grid. When I talk about national security, it's something I take near and dear. I'm really hoping to get on the Intel Committee because it's something I follow so closely that they invite me to those meetings that aren't completely classified and work with them. But one of the reasons, in this part that is sort of galling to me, and Ms. Clinton says, let it all out, this should be more transparent. She knows one of the reasons that she got it passed the last time was because some of the information in those that is contained in those emails is so classified that we can't let the world see them. So when you say you want it transparent, that somebody like me, that's like sandpaper on your heart. I mean, it's something that you really, it's pretty galling that they have the opportunity to say that because if any local official had set up a server at their home and ran the county commission or the Hudson mayor's office offline, the local newspapers and media would be all over them. And our president said that he didn't realize it until he found out about it in the press. Well, when you're sending something to Clinton Mail, if it doesn't say .gov after it, state.gov, you have an issue. You know you're outside the system. And I think it's one of those things where he was damned if he did and damned if he didn't. And and you look at who had the emails that he came up with, or that they came across, was Anthony Weiner. Enough said. I wouldn't doubt that this guy stored them for leverage in his own deal.
Congressman?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor.
No. The Great Lakes obviously are, and their associated watersheds are obviously a tremendous environmental resource. They're also an economic resource. Could you tell us a little bit about the efforts in Congress to protect the Great Lakes, especially from some of the invasive species?
Oh, thank you very much. It's something that when I looked around and said, what can I do to have a major impact for northeastern Ohio and Ohio? I realized that nobody was really standing up to speak on behalf of the Great Lakes. And I know my predecessor, Steve LaTourette, may he rest in peace, was big on it. And so I followed up on it. And I'm proud to tell you that I've been known as the Great Lakes guy. A friend of mine, Rick Nolan, Democrat from Minnesota, says, don't worry, when in Minnesota it's known as the Nolan-Joyce bill. I said, well, call it whatever you want, but just vote for it. But the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is something that protects and preserves our Great Lakes because, as I tell people, it's not just a lake or a series of lakes, it's a national treasure in which 40 million people get their drinking water, in which it provides 1.6 billion jobs. And you don't think of it, but think of all the things that go into the Great Lakes. And on top of that, the hunting and the fishing, and I was surprised, is the bird watching. There's 23 million people who come to Ohio every year to bird watch because of the habitats that we've helped put on breakwalls and along the shoreline of Great Lakes. I like to watch them. I like to watch ducks, especially about this time of year. But you know, it's one of those things where it's just really fun to work with people and explain to them. If they have questions about the Great Lakes, stop by my office. We'll give you all the information you need. We hold bipartisan working groups with Marcy Kaptur and Mike Kelly over in Pennsylvania and people up in Illinois to try to make sure that not only they understand, but everybody in their delegation understands. Because obviously the magic number is 218. When you have 435 members, you have to get to 218 on a vote. And I'm proud to tell you when GLR passed, there's only 17 people who voted against it. And I've got all their names and it's laminated. But I make a point of stopping by and explain to them, you know, look, we're going to spend this money anyhow. We need to spend it, Great Lakes restoration money, in a coordinated effect. And people say, why is that? Because, as you know, as business people and even at home, a project that requires money that's going to take time may have to go on a budget. And so if you're doing something, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative supplies $300 million a year for 5 years in a row. So therefore, if there's some things like going after the invasive species that's going to require investigation, time, money, then they know that at least over the next 5 years they have it, instead of having what we normally do in government. We give you a little bit, then we pull it back. Then we give you a little bit, oh, we got to cut, so we're going to cut yours. And it's one of those things that you'd be proud that it makes government work together. They have to share their information, whether EPA or Army Corps, everybody working on this has to share the information, and if they're not working in concert with the other groups, then you don't get the funds. So it's produced some tremendous results. I mean, as a kid, our big family vacation was up to Gem Beach in Catawba in the 70s. God knows what we were swimming in. and now the Great Lakes have come back so far, we can't stop. But the invasive species, you know, I'm not an expert in how to make that happen, but the Army Corps of Engineers has come up with a number of different ways, 8, one being do nothing, so 7. And I said, I don't care which one we want to pick, but let's pick one and let's start working towards making it happen. You know, they've done things with electric grids. I even had the EPA director admit in testimony that she doesn't care if we fish them to extinction. And, you know, along the river there, they're trying to. They've set up camps now where you can hunt these things with the bows since they jump out of the water. They're turning them into fish meal and sending it back to China. And, you know, electrocuting these things as fast as they can in the grids and trying to keep them from ever getting into the Great Lakes. Because especially Lake Erie, being as shallow as it is, game, set, match, if it gets in, they'll take over the lake. So I'm proud of the work we've done together on that. I'm proud of the bipartisan work, and I was certainly proud of the fact that all but 17 votes, and again, I know who they are. Yes, sir.
You obviously support the Constitution.
Yes, sir.
But how do you reconcile that with the statements of your nominee and his unconstitutional statements?
You know, you could spend every day rebutting that gentleman, and I use that word lightly. The gentleman part. We have to do something about our process. And that's why I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, where you can talk to people. You know, it's not, you think about it, and let's face it, most of us are about the same vintage. You grew up on the Kennedys, Martin Luther King, Ronald Reagan. I mean, there was, you listen to the speech and you were inspired. And it's one of those things that we didn't get any of that this election. And we still don't get any of it. I mean, on one side, they fixed the election to make sure you have one person in charge, and the other one, you know, Ted Cruz started out as the outsider, and I joked that Donald Trump got in the race as the outsider from hell. And he just went after everybody, and it's a shame. It really is. And I could tell you that you're not alone. And everywhere I go in the district, people come up and say the same thing. All the people in this country, and these two are the best we can do. So we need to change. I was endorsed John Kasich, and I think Governor Kasich's done a wonderful job here in Ohio. I think I was still hoping he'd pull a rabbit out of his hat somewhere in July when everybody came to town here in Cleveland, but that didn't work. But, you know, at the end of the day, when you look at the candidates that are out there, it's tough. The things you know about Hillary Clinton, I just can't do it. You know, and it's Gary Johnson. If he knew where Aleppo was, he might be a better a better candidate. But I tell you, the sort of sad part. One morning on Morning Joe, they had Bill Weld on, who's his vice president, and there's a guy who's pretty smart and articulate, and would be better off. And they asked how that came to play, where he was the vice president. He said, well, I've known Gary for a long time, and he called me and asked me, so what am I going to do? Tell him I want to be the president? But, you know, I think you're going to see, and I hope we see, some major corrections in how we go about this process and you know, talk about issues. And that's one of the things I pushed about when we're in D.C. when we get back. In the better way and better GOP is one way of going about it. But and I've said this before, we don't work hard enough. We need to do more as far as we get to D.C. We're going to start off on the first one of these, say, constitutional authority. And so all the meetings that we and all the hearings we have that week only talk about this problem, constitutional authority, how we rein in government, how we take control back. So the media would have nothing else to report but that, hopefully. They might, I'm sure they'll find something else, but, you know, but force the media and force the program so people in America hear what the problems are of our country, and then lay out the potential solutions, and then have the people we represent call in, phone in, text in, go online, or whatever. Make your voices known to your elected representatives so we can vote accordingly when we get to D.C. and force the issue and work from the day we get back in January through Thanksgiving, maybe a week off and Christmas or Easter and a week off in the summer so people can take their kids on vacation and go out. But you know, just solidly work our way through there and address these problems one by one, because in all these debates, I haven't heard one of our problems discussed in an intelligent manner with any solutions laid out that any of us could be proud of. We need to do it in the House and Senate, and I really hope we start taking that up when we get back. Yes, ma'am.
If you're intent on changing that process, I have a two-part question.
Okay.
The first one is, how are you going to change the dynamic in Congress to ensure that this is, so far, a two-party system,
Mm-hmm.
that you're speaking with your colleagues across the aisle? This past session has been a disaster in that way, because my understanding is the party has been under discipline not to do that, so things have come to a screeching halt for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
The second part of that question has to do, it's related
Mm-hmm.
to functional Congress, but it has to do with campaign financing. Where do you stand on Citizens United and the control that has been provided as a result of the unbridled access to resources outside of a district, so that the constituents really don't have much to say about holding you accountable?
Well, let me back up in that, or start at the end of the. I believe that every 2 years you're up for election. Well, in my case, it's almost every year, since I continue to have primary opposition, because I like to think of myself as sort of the porridge. I'm not too hot, I'm not too cold. But, you know, I try to work with what the people in my district tell me. And we reach out and poll and in every way we can, every media we can, and medium, in order to try to figure out what the district wants. Because it's not about what I think, it's about what you think. And the money that comes into districts, I mean, I was telling you about it, my friend in California, and he just called me yesterday about something, and we were talking, he said, well, the House Majority PAC, which is Nancy Pelosi, is going to spend $400,000 in his district. He's in Central Valley, California. It's 70%, only 89,000 people will vote for in the whole election. I mean, you represent 700,000 in your district, but only 89,000 are going to vote, and 70% of those are Latino. So you can imagine, I mean, he holds all his debates in Spanish, so you imagine the uphill battle he's got with our nominee. And, $400,000 a week before election, no one raises that kind of money, and he can't raise it in his district. I mean, those things are tough. I understand. And I think we should sort of set numbers on, I'm not sure exactly what that number, but it's 250 or 500 maximum on an election. That's all you can spend, and spend it wisely, and it forces people to get out in the community and be part of coming to Rotaries and coming to be part of their community, and so you have a chance to touch and feel and talk to them. I mean, I know my ads are a little bit hokey with the Just Dave thing, but it's amazing how many people come up to you in a Heinen's or Giant Eagle or Home Depot and say, "You're here." Yeah, no one shops for me. It's one of those things. I feel it, and I think it's important, and I think most people who are there, Democrat or Republican, care deeply about their country. We just happen to see it, maybe how we get to the solutions differently. So I'm in a number of bipartisans groups, one with Congressman Renacci, that I'd started one with a freshman. He's now running for Senate in Florida, Patrick Murphy, who is also an accounting major. And we'd started a freshman bipartisan group, and ours sort of dissolved because he went off to run, and so I got invited into Jim Renacci's. And so we talk about only economic issues. And when you leave the social stuff to the side, it's amazing how fast you can come to consensus. And it's amazing how fast we talk about our bills and working together and trying to help move our bills between their conference and our conference. And I don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican bill. If it's a good idea and it's in the best interest of our country, then we need to vote for it. And so when we talk about the things that we need to do, like the infrastructure, we passed a bill, luckily last year, but it only provides $58 billion towards the whole country, and that's basically maintenance, repair, replace, and fix some of the things that are there. It's not any new roads. China spent $100 billion last year in other countries, subsidizing their ports, fixing their infrastructure so they can sell more of their goods to different countries. And so we need to start thinking, instead of the next race, because I'm sure, on November 9th, you're probably going to hear 2020 candidates, which is sickening. But we got to start talking about our country and how we take our country back and how we focus our country and get the good ship America back on tracks, because it's one of those things right now where we've got problems, and it just drives me nuts, because I didn't go there because I like the title. I truly went there because I want to work on fixing the problems that exist. And we didn't get in this overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight, but we got to change the partisan rancor, and we got to change the way we focus on the country's problems and how we get to consensus. And I found when I'm doing things like the GLRI, I take the time to meet with people individually. What are your problems with this bill? We're going to spend this money anyhow. Wouldn't you like to see it spent in a concerted effort by us? That's our job as House, to control purse strings, then abdicate our responsibility. And we do that every time we sign another continuing resolution. We just hand the president the money, and the president governs the way he sees fit, and we're not telling them how to spend the money because we're just giving the money away. And so if we can, I think the more you listen, my dad was always big on, the good Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 tongue, so you should listen twice as much as you speak. And his corollary was that is, don't talk too long, you're not that smart. It provides for background. When you listen to people and you walk them through it, eventually you'll get people to understand that why something like the GLRI is good, why our infrastructure bills are good, why they make sense for America, and why they should vote for it, and then have the guts to go home and explain to people. You vote for things that, the Heritage or these third-party groups, they said vote no. I said, do they have they own your voting card? Do they have a spot in your district? No, but they'll spend a couple $1 million against you in your district, which they've done to me in primaries, because I'm not conservative enough, or too liberal, whatever you want to call it. I think I'm doing the job because I've been, thanks to all of you, I've been getting 20% plus vote totals over my opponents, and by explaining, coming back and explaining what my program is and telling people the truth. We can all deal with the truth. You know, the old joke in accounting was that I don't need you to tell me what the numbers are. The numbers speak to me. You know, that's what we can do with our budget if we sit down and do it. We just explain the budget, what it is to people, and how the money's being spent, and work towards common goals of getting our country back on track. Yes, sir.
I think the number one problem in this country today, in my opinion, is the total fiscal irresponsibility in Washington and the lack of willing to address the financial problems with Social Security and Medicare. And I don't hear anything about it in
You're
the
right.
national discussion. Do you sense any interest on either side of the aisle to get to that number one problem?
There certainly is on our side. I can tell you that it's part of what we talked about in Better GOP, finding ways to make sure that we fix the program, because we have only a limited amount of time to get that done. And, you know, Social Security was never meant to be a retirement plan. And so we have to provide incentives for kids to start, you know, putting away money for their IRAs and investing in themselves and investing in their own retirement and not counting on Social Security. I mean, Kelly and I started with our kids well before I got into Congress. And, you know, I had friends who said when we made the kids work at 14 down at Heinen's or Giant Eagle, oh, man, you're rough on your kids. And no, one, they should learn how to work. Work ethic's good for everybody. But two, what they didn't know is that whatever the kids made that went on a W-2, we could put away in an IRA for. And my son, who started off in pre-med, but then when he got the letter, maybe he should consider dentistry, switched over to finance. He took to finance like a fish to water. And so I gave him the IRA, and then it gave him some incentive to go on and do that. And I said, well, how many of your friends do you know have an IRA? It's not a one. And he's in finance. So, I mean, we have to educate people that, you know, America's not here to take care of every one of your concerns. We're here to provide, like Social Security and Medicare, we're safety nets that were in place. And you know, the safety net isn't the only retirement system. Everybody's got to account for their own retirement planning, too, and get involved in that. And that's part of the education process. But if you have hearings on Social Security, explain what the numbers are. Here are the potential solutions. You know, some people are going to have to take a haircut. Maybe we got to increase the age a year every month for, you know, as you move along. And I mean, we were talking about a month for every year. So over 2 years, you get it from 65 to 67 because people are living longer. I mean, that's just a reality of it. When it was set up, it was a pretty good system in that you were supposed to get the benefits at 65, but you were supposed to die at 64. Now the average age is 78. So we have to explain to people that where we went sideways on it and get back to it. And we have, those are realistic conversations. That's what I want the Washington, D.C. to do. And so you'll get demonized because when I bring up programs like that, you know, you'll find there'll be ads attacking me saying that I want to cut senior citizens who are a loyal voting bloc. And that's why they scare the hell out of people. You know, they want to cut their Social Security and they want to cut their Medicare and throw them out on the street and have death panels and all that type of stuff. And I've never, ever, I'm going to tell you right now, heard anyone on either side talk about that way. They have talked about why we need to make changes, but the courage to actually cast the vote and do those things to make the changes is rough. I've told the Speaker, Boehner, and I've told Speaker Ryan the same thing. Look, there are going to be some painful changes that need to be made. And people are not going to like it. But if it gets a good ship of America on moving back in the right direction, count me in. You've got my vote. But we have to have those discussions. We can't play these games where you do show votes that don't mean anything. And, you know, we repealed or passed bills to repeal the Affordable Care Act 68 times that have done nothing to repeal the Affordable Care Act. But, you know, a new freshman class will come in and we're going to have another vote, I guarantee you, within 2 months that we're going to repeal it that won't do anything. And that's where I said we're lying to people, because we have to tell people the truth. And that's why I tell people, you know, they come out, but you're going to vote to repeal it or defund it was the big one in 2013. Ted Cruz was going around the country telling we're going to defund Obamacare, it's going to go sideways. And I would take the time to explain there's 21 separate taxes inside the Affordable Care Act that go into effect that effectively make you pay for it, whether we defund it or not. It still has those things embedded in the bill that's going to make it work. But you're going to vote to defund it, aren't you? Fair enough. You want me to vote to defund it, I will. But I'm telling you, it's a show vote, and it doesn't mean anything. And, you know, it goes along with the idea that we make this money, whatever I'm making now, for the rest of my life. And so, you know, I've had angry people come up and, you know, you're making that for the rest of your life. I said, do me a favor, don't vote for me. I said, what? Yeah, don't vote for me. I said, if I'm that stupid, I'm going to subject myself and my family to running every 2 years and get beat up like this, and I'm making the money the rest of my life, then, you know, we make 1 point a year. So if I'm there 10 years, I make 10% of what I'm making now in our retirement program. Our health is the Affordable Exchange Act and exchange in Washington, D.C., of which none of our doctors are on it. Thank God my wife's a nurse at UH. Anything else? Come on, don't let me off easy now. You know, it's funny because when I first started doing this, I'd get up and I'd give my talk and I'd sit down and Steve would say, get back up here, you chicken. I said, what do you mean? He says, you got to answer questions. You don't get away like that. Bill, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, thanks. I don't want to let you off the hook easily. We've got this tax system, it's kind of an Accountants Relief Act. What are your thoughts for reasonable prospects in the next Congress to actually do something in the way of tax reform, both corporate and individual?
We absolutely have to do both, because if you just do corporate, we have so many S-corps here in America that, you know, mom and pop places that make the changes. The other thing we have to do is deal with the estate tax. I mean, there's some discussion in some camps that we have to raise that. They've been paying tax on it their whole life. You know, a family business, especially the family farms, which there are a lot of in the district, you can't buy enough life insurance to cover your tax on transferring that property and making those changes. So we have to start off out of the box by doing a couple of things. The first off is lower the rates. You know, and whether there's consensus as to whether it's 28, 25, 20. I think there's a lot of consensus with major corporations that if we got down somewhere 25 or so, that they would stop looking offshore, even though, you know, Ireland's at 12. And secondly, we have to have not necessarily a tax holiday, but some type of program to repatriate and bring back that money that's offshore. There's $2 trillion plus that's sitting offshore. And when we do the cuts for both corporations and individuals, obviously that's, you know, it's crazy because in government, as you know, that's revenue. You know, so you're going to cut the amount of revenue in when our bills are staying the same or increasing. That's what the $1 trillion gives us an opportunity to sort of make whole until the economy starts to kick up. Because once people have more money and they spend more money and companies invest more in production, and the economy will eventually pick up, but that's probably a 18-month to 2-year lag after the cuts. So that money, the trillions of dollars, will help us get to where we need to go and get the economy moving and still be able to pay our bills without having to borrow money from China. The other thing that we need to do is, when I was talking about having a 2-page front and back, you're going to have to eliminate all the exemptions and deductions and credits. When GE can file a 17,000-page return and pay no taxes, and Joann Fabric is paying the maximum rate because they're too busy doing what they do to hire lobbyists and lawyers and accountants to go down to Washington and lobby for the things that they want, that's when you know the code is in trouble. It needs to be easy, fair, simple. People understand it. It doesn't look like a telephone book. You know, people will be able to understand if I make $100,000, then I'm going to owe 20 or 15, whatever our final numbers are. And that you're going to have some, again, when you're talking about helping work with education, you want to give some incentives to the people to train for the jobs that exist. When you're trying to pull people out of poverty, you want to give some child care credits and exemptions so people have the ability to cover those things while they get up and hopefully get a better job and continue to move up the workforce. But we have a large amount of the workforce that's not just not working, but they've given up on trying to find jobs. So we need to help do something incentivized in the tax code to bring them back into the workforce and have companies want to bring those people back in the workforce. It's sort of sad when Uber is I hear them advertising on the radio for drivers because people want to drive around there. And a friend of mine who lives down the street has an active landscaping and snowplowing thing. And he said, I can't find people to snowplow, let alone landscape. We need to make sure that we do what we need to do in the tax code to provide incentives for people to work, incentives for companies to employ and continue to spend within their companies to grow, and disincentives in there for people who want to leave the country or change the way we're doing business. Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to ask you a what-if question.
Sure.
We pretty much know what to expect if Hillary gets elected. It'll probably be a lot of the same that we've seen for the last 8 years. What do you think will happen the first 100 days when Donald Trump, or if Donald Trump gets elected? Have fun.
You know, one of the things that I thought, and maybe nobody wanted to get near him enough to do that, but, you know, if Trump would have started to lay out a cabinet, and there were people that we could respect, you put people at Colin Powell, Secretary of State, or some, you know, people that you say, yeah, I can deal with that. You know, he could be the crazy uncle, you know, drunked up at Thanksgiving talking craziness over here. But the people who are working, who are going to be working day to day, are people I know are solid and we can work with and get things done. I think that would have been much more effective for him if he would have done that. I never worked with Mike Pence. I came in with his successor from Indiana. But by all accounts, people who have worked with him in the House said he's a solid guy and that he's well-meaning and would be good as vice presidential timber. But you know, it's one of those things where we have to have. Hopefully we keep the Senate as Republicans. I hope we keep the Senate and the House, and then again do something like Better GOP, where we lay out our vision, and then hopefully we have a president who will be working with us to implement that vision, because this wasn't from top-down bureaucrats in Washington. This was talking to people in our districts and talking about the things that matter, that when I go to events like this, or you know, tax reform, the things where people are talking about, these are things that matter. These are pocketbook issues that if we don't deal with Social Security and these other things, we don't change the way America is running, then you know, we're not going to have our America very long. It's going to continue. We're going to go down go off the rails here. So it's very important that we set out a vision of plan and hopefully have somebody in the White House who'd work with us on that plan. I can't tell you what he'd be like. I mean, my only encounter with him was when he came to talk to our conference, and it was much different than what you'd hear on TV. It wasn't like he gave us any kernels of this is what I do when I get in. He did indicate that he'd be willing to work with us, and I'd take him at his word on that. But one thing about the president, I mean, this president, having my sort of studied presidents over the years, this president's been unique in that he's really had a mentality, especially in the second term, to go it alone. He really doesn't care what Senate has to say. And these bipartisan groups that I've been in, you know, I say, well, the president needs to do this, or the president needs to do that. And they laugh and say, look, I don't know why you expect him to talk to you. He doesn't talk to us. And so you know, that's sad too. You know, one thing you got to give the presidents up to now, they've worked with, you know, Reagan, Tip O'Neill is a classic example where you have the bipartisanship where the president laid down a marker, I need this, and Tip O'Neill said, well, I need that. And then together they worked to accomplish both. You know, he wanted, Reagan wanted a vote to increase spending and the deficit, and he wanted, Tip O'Neill asked him for a letter to every one of his members saying that why he needed it and why we're behind it. Next morning, everybody's office, there was a letter signed by the president underneath their drawer. So, I mean, that if they sit down and work out together, you know, we got to get back to making that work and stop talking about us versus them and talking about us for being America. You know, I've said it before, and I know people say, oh, it sounds corny, but once we get back in January, we need to take off our red jerseys or blue jerseys and put on our red, white, and blue jerseys and do what's right for our country. And just stop talking about, you know, our next election. And we do it as Republicans. We go after, one of the nicest guys I met when I got there was a guy from the South that considered a blue dog Democrat, John Barrow, and went after him every time and defeated him. John Barrow was a guy who reached out to probably 12 of us, you know, half and half, Republicans and Democrats, invited us over for dinner. Let's talk about some of the issues. I'll never forget that. It was very nice of the guy to do, and it was something that you realize that when you get an honest broker like that, you can go up to him with an idea that you have, and he'll tell you straight to your face, instead of telling you, oh yeah, that'll work, and tell you straight to your face, yeah, we can try to work on this, we can make some changes, or I think we can get it through our conference, if you can get it through your conference. That's the kind of negotiation that we need to get back to and talk about day in, day out, how we can make things work instead of how we're trying to kill ideas.
Congressman,
Yes.
You were talking about the tax changes.
Yes.
You made mention of 50,000 and under, no taxes,
Mhm.
15 or 20 grand against 100 grand as you go, so you know what you're doing, and then spend a lot of time talking about incentives and disincentives. And isn't that how we got in the tax problem, with every congressman putting in their incentives and disincentives?
Well, you know,
Is it complicated?
but there's some as far as like the home mortgage deduction. You know, the realtors groups obviously rail against that. There's going to be some incentive because you want kids to buy homes. I mean, like my son in Chicago, he's happy to be to rent. But
Should Congress be encouraging that, or should that be the choice of that individual and their family and what they can do?
well, home mortgage interest deduction is one thing, but there's never going to be the second house is going to be eliminated because the second houses became boats, anything you could live in. You know, so
Well, it's the same thing with the tax attorneys and the.
They got abused.
If they're all the lobbyists who are the ones who want the incentives and disincentives, it's gonna keep happening. That's why you either do it or you don't do it. If every congressman gets to put in their little piece, aren't we where we started?
Well, you know, we could be, yes, we could be. But when I was saying there's incentives or disincentives, I mean, you have to provide, if somebody's in a company that just went belly up and they need to be retrained, then we should provide some incentive for them to go back to school instead of government just paying that. But, you know, if it's going to cost them $2,000 or $3,000 to learn how to run a CNC machine, yeah, then, you know, we should be able to let them write that off so they can get the training that they need to get a job, to get back in the market, versus saying, we'll pay you to stay home for 99 weeks. That's what I'm saying. There has to be certain trade-offs, but limited, very limited. Believe me, I'm on to get it to the point where they have to be limited to, they have to provide either direct or child care credits like I was talking about. You know, you get a lady with a few kids and she's trying to work and take care of her family, and, you know, she needs some help because $40,000 or $50,000 job and she's got a couple of kids and, you know, she's got a couple in daycare. It's easier for her and less expensive to stay home and get the government subsidy than it would be to go out and get a job and work and try to provide a livelihood. That's the kind of the thing we need to eliminate. We have to make it more productive, more helpful to be in the workforce than to sit at home.
Thank you.
Thank you.